the girl no one saw. For years the city had learned how to look through her. People passed her every day, over her sleeping form beneath the cracked bus shelter, past her bowed head as she gathered coins no one meant to give, beyond the quiet kindness in her eyes that never demanded attention. She had no name anyone used anymore. Just girl, vagrant, problem. The city had erased her slowly, patiently, until invisibility became her shield. She accepted it, because being noticed had once cost her everything. That night, the rain came without warning. Cold, sharp drops cut through the thin blanket she wrapped around herself. She didn't move. Pain had taught her stillness was safer than hope. Around her, laughter spilled from a nearby cafe, warm and careless, while her stomach twisted with hunger she pretended not to feel. A group of men noticed her then. They didn't see her as human, only as entertainment. One kicked her bag aside. Another laughed when her hands trembled. Coins scattered across the pavement like spilled pity. She bowed her head, whispering apologies she didn't owe, absorbing cruelty the way the world expected her to. And that was when the night changed. Across the street, shadows folded inward as if the darkness itself had bent. The air grew heavy, ancient, alert. Time slowed, not stopped but listening. He stood there. Watching. The Vampire King had not walked among humans for decades. Cities bored him. Mortals blurred together. But something had pulled him here, a sensation he hadn't felt since before empires fell. A pulse. A whisper of power buried so deep it had nearly vanished. Nearly. His crimson gaze locked onto the girl kneeling in the rain. Not because she was weak, but because she was containing something impossible. When one of the men raised his foot to strike her again, the king moved. No blur. No violence. Just presence. The man froze, breath trapped in his throat as the night itself seemed to press against his chest. Fear, old, instinctive, ancestral, took hold. The others backed away, their laughter dying into silence they couldn't explain. Leave, the king said softly. They ran. The girl didn't look up. She expected the next blow, the next insult. Her body was trained for disappointment. But instead, a shadow fell across her, steady, protective. Are you hurt? The voice asked. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was careful. She lifted her face for the first time. Their eyes met. Something ancient stirred between them. For a heartbeat, the power she'd buried since childhood trembled, an echo of something old, something royal, something that had once shaken bloodlines and terrified monsters. The Vampire King felt it fully, and for the first time in centuries, he knelt before a human girl. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, not knowing why tears burned her eyes. I came because of you, he replied. Rain hissed against stone. The city breathed around them, unaware that destiny had just broken its silence. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know why the darkness obeyed him. She only knew that for the first time in years, someone was truly seeing her. And the Vampire King, feared ruler of immortal bloodlines, realized something that unsettled him deeply. This homeless girl wasn't powerless. She was hiding. The king who offered protection, not chains. The girl expected the stranger to disappear once the danger passed. People always did. Help, when it came at all, was brief and conditional. But he remained, standing between her and the world as though the night itself belonged to him. His coat shielded her from the rain without touching her, as if he feared crossing a boundary she had not yet granted. You don't have to be afraid, he said, though his voice carried the weight of centuries. I will not harm you. She laughed weakly at that, a sound shaped by exhaustion rather than humor. Everyone says that. I am not everyone. Something in his words made her look again. Not at his face, but at the restraint in his posture. The way power coiled beneath his stillness and used. Untaken. He could command. He could dominate. Yet he chose patience. He offered her shelter. Not a demand, not a command, but a choice. A place where no one could touch her without consequence. Where hunger was answered, not exploited. Where her existence was not treated as a mistake. She followed him because she had nothing left to lose. His estate stood beyond the city's reach, hidden behind wards older than governments. Stone walls breathed history. Candlelight replaced electricity. Silence replaced noise. And for the first time in years she slept without fear. In the days that followed, the Vampire King observed her quietly. He noticed how she shared food with birds before feeding herself. How she flinched at raised voices. How she apologized even when injured. These small, unnoticed kindnesses unsettled him more than any threat ever had. And then one night his enemies came. Hunters breached the perimeter, drawn by the same dormant power that had called him. They attacked him with silver-forged weapons, ancient and cruel. He fought them off, but not without cost. Blood darkened the marble floor. She should have run. Instead, she knelt beside him. Her hands glowed faintly, not violently, not explosively, but with controlled, ancient precision. She pressed her palms to his wound, whispering words no human language carried anymore. The bleeding stopped. The vampire king stared at her in disbelief. "You saved me," he said. She shook her head. "I couldn't let you die." And in that moment he realized the truth. She wasn't just hiding power. She had been protecting the world from it. The girl who spoke too ancient blood. He began teaching her control, not ownership. He refused blood oaths. Refused binding magic. Every lesson began with consent, something no one had ever offered her before. Her power revealed itself slowly. She could read ancient blood languages etched into vampire law. She understood magic older than kingdoms. She sensed corruption where others saw authority. When rival vampires accused her of manipulation, she spoke their oldest language aloud, one forbidden to humans. The court fell silent. Laws long ignored reawakened. Lies collapsed. They realized then why she had been hidden. She was not meant to rule through force. She was meant to balance power. The vampire king defended her without claiming her. Protected her without caging her. His affection grew quietly, in the way he stood closer during danger, in the way he listened when she spoke, in the way he let her walk away unharmed when she needed space. Love did not arrive with declarations. It arrived with respect. The truth that shook the immortal world. The summons came at dusk, carried not by messengers but by pressure itself. The air inside the citadel tightened, ancient wards awakening as if the stones remembered older wars. The vampire king felt it immediately. Every instinct in him warned that the fragile balance he had protected for centuries was about to be tested. He did not hide the truth from her. He never had. "They know," he said quietly. She was standing near the tall arched window, watching the last light bleed from the sky. For a moment she did not turn. When she did, her face was calm, but there was a familiar ache behind her eyes, the same expression she wore when the world had once cornered her beneath open skies and cold nights. "I wondered how long it would take," she replied. The council chamber was older than cities, carved from black stone etched with blood laws written before humans had names. She walked beside him through its towering gates, every step echoing with judgment. Eyes followed her, ancient, calculating, hungry. To them she was not a person. She was an asset that had escaped control. They accused her without raising their voices. They spoke of balance while demanding submission. They called it tradition when it was fear. They insisted her power was dangerous precisely because it could not be owned. "Bind her," one voice said. "For the good of the realm." The word bind made her hands tremble, memories rising unbidden. Hands grabbing, voices laughing, choice stolen in small cruel ways. She took a breath, grounding herself the way she had learned. The vampire king stepped forward instantly, placing himself between her and the council. "She will not be bound," he said. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Defiance from a king was rare. Defiance for a human was unthinkable. "You forget your place," they warned him. "I remember it perfectly," he answered. "And I reject it." That was when they revealed their mistake. They brought forward the oaths. Blood contracts. Invisible chains that had bound countless humans over generations. Runaways, the desperate, the forgotten. They expected her to flinch. To break. Instead, she stepped closer, eyes closing as her senses reached outward. The ancient language rose naturally to her lips, not shouted, not forced, but spoken with quiet authority. The chamber shook. The oaths screamed. Every lie woven into them surfaced at once. Coercion. Fear. Consent stolen and rewritten. The truth burned itself into the walls, visible to every immortal present. Gasps followed. Denials collapsed. One by one the bindings shattered. Across the city, humans collapsed to their knees as invisible weights vanished from their souls. Some cried. Some screamed. Some simply breathed freely for the first time in years. The council recoiled in horror. "You would destroy our order," they hissed. She opened her eyes then, steady and unafraid. "No," she said softly. "I am correcting it." Silence followed. Not because they agreed, but because they could not argue. Justice had spoken in a voice older than crowns. They turned to the vampire king, expecting hesitation. He did not hesitate. "If your order requires suffering to survive," he said, "then it deserves to end." That night power changed shape. Not through bloodshed. Through truth. And the world would never be the same again. The queen who chose her own crown. The aftermath of truth was quieter than war, but far heavier. Power did not vanish overnight. It shifted, resisted, adapted. The citadel still stood. The council still existed. But the silence that followed was no longer one of control, it was one of reckoning. In the days that followed, she walked the halls without escort, her presence no longer questioned, only studied. Immortals who once would not have acknowledged her now stepped aside. Not out of fear but uncertainty. They did not know how to treat someone who could not be owned. The Vampire King watched her carefully during those days. He did not hover. He did not command. He had spent centuries ruling through certainty, and now he stood in a world where the most powerful force he had ever encountered was her freedom. He found that he respected it more than any throne. When the formal offer came, it arrived as ceremony rather than threat. Elders gathered beneath vaulted stone, ancient banners unfurled, voices measured and cautious. They spoke of stability, of unity, of the need for a symbol the realm could not ignore. They offered her a crown forged from ancestral metal, warm with history and expectation. She did not touch it. Instead, she asked a single question. "If I accept this," she said calmly, "will I belong to the throne, or will the throne belong to the people it serves?" No one answered. That was answer enough. She turned away from the crown and walked until the air changed, until the stone corridors opened into the night garden where moonlight touched old fountains. The Vampire King followed, stopping several steps behind her, giving her space even now. He had learned that love did not require proximity to be present. "I don't want to rule through fear," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. "I don't want to be protected at the cost of my voice." "You never were," he said and meant it. She turned to face him then, truly looking at him not as a king, not as a vampire, but as the man who had knelt in the rain and offered her a choice when no one else had. "You could have claimed me," she said. "You never did." "I wanted you to stay," he answered honestly. "But only if you stayed as yourself." The silence between them held centuries of loneliness on one side and a lifetime of survival on the other. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for his hand. He did not move until her fingers touched his. "I will stand with you," she said. "Not above. Not beneath. Beside." The crown was never placed on her head. Instead, the laws were rewritten. Blood oaths were abolished. Consent became unbreakable law. Humans bound unjustly were freed and compensated. Vampire houses that resisted were stripped of influence, not by force but by exposure. Change came slowly, but it came. In the nights that followed, stories spread. Of a homeless girl who spoke truth into immortality. Of a king who learned that restraint was strength. Of a realm that discovered power could protect without consuming. Sometimes, when the city slept, she returned to the streets where she had once been invisible. Not to suffer, but to remember. And when she did, she was never alone. The Vampire King walked beside her, not as a guardian shadow, but as a partner who knew the cost of being unseen. They did not call her queen at first. They called her the one who chose. And in that choice, the world finally learned its lesson. No one is small. No one is disposable. And the strongest crowns are the ones never forced upon a willing head. The world that remembered her name. Time did not soften the world overnight, but it changed the way it watched her. Cities rebuilt their rhythms slowly, like hearts learning a new beat after surviving a long illness. Old systems resisted as they always did, but fear no longer ruled from the shadows. Where blood laws once whispered obedience, now there were questions. Where silence had been enforced, voices began to rise. She never claimed a throne. Yet her presence reshaped every room she entered. The Vampire King noticed how people responded to her now, not with awe, not with worship, but with trust. Humans approached her without trembling. Vampires spoke carefully, aware that power no longer meant immunity. And every time she spoke, it was with the same quiet steadiness she had once used to ask strangers for nothing at all. On one such night, they stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. Light stretched endlessly below them, glowing like scattered stars. She leaned against the stone railing, wrapped in a simple cloak, the kind she preferred even now. Wealth had never tempted her. Control had never interested her. What she valued was choice. "You could have taken everything," the Vampire King said softly. "They would have given it to you." She smiled faintly. "I know. That's why I didn't." He studied her profile, the calm strength in her expression. For centuries he had believed immortality meant distance, that survival required detachment. But she had undone that belief without force, without command. Simply by remaining kind in a world that rewarded cruelty. Do you ever miss it? He asked. The quiet of being unseen? She considered the question carefully. Sometimes, she admitted. But I don't miss being erased. Below them, a small gathering formed near the old transit station, the place where she had once slept. Volunteers distributed food and blankets, their work funded by laws she had helped reshape. No statues bore her likeness. No monuments carried her name. Yet her impact lived in every small mercy made possible. She watched the scene with quiet reflection. They won't remember me forever, she said. They will, he replied. Not as a ruler. As a turning point. She turned to him then, her expression thoughtful. And you? He paused. The feared king. The ancient predator. The ruler of knights. I am learning, he said slowly, how to live without ruling. That answer mattered more to her than any vow. Their relationship remained what it had always been. Unrushed, unclaimed, built on presence rather than promise. He did not guard her like a possession. She did not heal him like a responsibility. They stood together because they chose to, night after night. When threats emerged, and they did, she faced them not with power alone but with truth. When old enemies tested the new order, the vampire king stood beside her, not in front. The world adjusted. It had no other choice. Years passed. Legends formed. Some exaggerated. Some softened the truth. But one story remained consistent across every version, that the most powerful change did not come from bloodshed or domination, but from a girl who refused to surrender her humanity, even when offered eternity. On the anniversary of the night they met, rain fell gently over the city. She returned once more to the street where everything had changed. The bus shelter had been repaired. The pavement clean. A small plaque rested near the wall, unassuming, easy to miss. Read. No one is invisible. She stood there quietly, memories stirring, not with pain but with clarity. The vampire king waited nearby, giving her space as he always did. When she turned back toward him, she reached out her hand. Ready? She asked. For what? He replied. For tomorrow. He took her hand without hesitation. Together they walked forward, not as queen and king, not as savior and protector, but as two beings who had chosen each other in a world finally learning how to choose better. And somewhere in the quiet between footsteps, the night itself seemed to listen, and approve. End of part 6.